and we got beat 52-0, and I absolutely loved it. So we played at West Bowling, and a scout spoke to the coach, who then pointed him to my dad, and before I knew it, I was training at what was then Bradford North and now Bradford Bulls. And be nice to people on the way up, you need them on the way down. And that's been a mantra that I've always carried with me. I was coaching the junior academy, working on recruitment, setting up the age group sides.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Great Schools Trust podcast, The Great in You. My name's Steven Panter, and this is our 5th podcast, so I'm really pleased to have our guest with us today, and I'm really pleased that the podcast is developing and going where we want it to go. We're talking to lots of different people. Today I've got a fantastic guest, a good friend of mine, Tony Fretwell. Hiya Tony, you okay?
I am, mate, yes. Delighted to be here, thank you.
Thanks very much. And thanks for coming to see us today. Obviously we've spoken about the podcast and what it's about. So just for the viewers as well, just to remind them, the podcast is about people that have experienced difficult times in their life, people that have, maybe gone through, trauma or something that's affected them significantly. But then as a result, they've come out of the other end and they help and support other people. And that's why it's called The Great in You. Let's get going with the actual podcast then. I suppose my first question is, and a question that I always ask the guests is, so that they can get to know a little bit more about you, is what was life like for you growing up? What was your childhood like? What were your family like? What was it like growing up in Yorkshire, as I grew up in Yorkshire as well? So just tell us a little bit about that and your experience, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an only child, no brothers or sisters, and I grew up in East Leeds, a place called Halton. Not Halton where Widnes and Runcorn is, but it's Halton in Leeds. And my grandparents lived in a place called Scarcroft, which is just kind of on the way to Wetherby. So it gets a bit rural there, so it feels like the countryside. So I spent a lot of time there. My dad worked at the bus factory in Crossgates in East Leeds. And my mum had a variety of jobs. She worked at the post office. She worked at a fruit and veg shop. She also worked at the bingo place as a bingo caller at one point. So, I had a really happy childhood. There's no doubt, and just felt quite idyllic, and a kind of childhood that with my own children, I'd look back and think I'd want them to have a similar experience to that I did.
Yeah, that's lovely. I do know the area, not too far from Seacroft.
Oh, not too far. Well, me nan, who was a huge influence on me, she worked at the Tesco's in Seacroft.
Right.
Yeah, and we
when it was posh to work at Tesco's and to go to Tesco's.
Yeah, and we used to go to the Seacroft Centre in the holidays. If I was staying at my nan's, we'd go there, and she would get me. Whilst we call it Greg's, it used to be called Thurston's in Yorkshire. I don't know why.
I tell people about that all the time.
And I would get a cheese and onion pasty, and I would have that for my lunch. And there was a shop called Romart, and Romart basically sold. It just sold everything. It was like a nondescript shop. It was a bit like a cheap version of Wilko's. And I used to go in there and get a toy. So it was a cheese and onion pasty and a toy from Romart's. And nice. Very happy memories of that, yeah.
And we're friends on Facebook. We, friends, colleagues, we know each other through other people. And, I went to school with a couple of lads that from rugby and things like that. So I see your pictures on Facebook all the time, not just of your lovely family, but also of your parents as well, and how close you are to your parents. Now that's absolutely lovely, and something that I suppose not everybody has. So what was school like for you then?
I really enjoyed school. I would describe myself as on the periphery of the cool group. So there was there were kind of the trendy kids, and I wasn't one of them. I hung around with a small group of, I'd refer to as outsiders a little bit. So if we played football, we didn't play in the big game. We played on a smaller game to the side on our own. Or if we were playing after school, we wouldn't tell everybody where we were going to play. It was like a smaller group. And that becomes more relevant later, that I was a bit of an outsider. My first kind of things that I was enthusiastic about centered around music. I was a huge Michael Jackson fan.
Me too.
And my first ambition was to be one of his backing singers.
Okay.
I wanted my mum to perm my hair because I thought that would provide the look. Didn't happen. And I think if it had have happened, it definitely wouldn't have provided the look. It would have provided a look, that's for sure. So that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of do that kind of
So music was your first passion?
Yeah.
Were you confident in school?
I must have been, because I took part in plays. I remembered being in school productions. I remembered being in the choir and stuff like that. So I did like that kind of performance and be kind of somebody who likes studying media now and all the dramatic studies and courses and stuff like that.
And you're quite, it seems to me straight away, you're quite happy and comfortable in an environment like this. Imagine you're quite happy presenting, and you deliver training as well, don't you, for your job?
Yeah.
So you've got that confidence, but I think that comes from when you're younger, and that confidence is instilled in you, when you're kind of given that confidence by the adults around you. Is that fair to say?
I think so, yeah, because I will always give everything that I do 100%, and I've been very fortunate that a lot of the time it's come good. There's not been too many things that I've tried that have gone badly. I remember I didn't have much interest in sport, which, given the rest of the story, it becomes quite ironic. But what changed that, there was a PE teacher called Mr. Reed. So I went to mixed primary, and then I went to a middle school, and that was mixed. And then when we went to secondary school, which I think was from year 9 onwards, it was all boys. Very different culture, an all boys school, quite unruly. There was nothing to kind of calm everybody down. Everybody was just kind of competing with each other.
A lot of testosterone.
Yeah, a lot of testosterone.
I went to an all boys grammar school, in Bradford.
And then Mr. Reed, one PE lesson, he said to me, "You're all right at rugby. You're not very good at anything else, but you're all right at rugby."
That kind of
and he added
underhanded compliment.
He added that kind of showing a 80s teaching mindset. He said, "You're not great at everything else, but you're all right at rugby. So come down to after school training." And that's the first time anybody had ever said to me that I was particularly all right at anything.
So that was like a bit of an endorsement, really, wasn't it, from him? And he was saying, "Listen, come. I'm not going to, blow smoke up your rucksack, but you're all right. So come and have a look." Yeah.
And I remember our first game, we played a game against Armley School. It was the foulest of nights. It was, I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday. We finished the game and it was completely pitch black. Not all of the kids had boots, so I remember kids just falling over and slipping in the mud and stuff. And we played in red and pink striped tops, obviously because they were old. And we got beat 52-0. And I absolutely loved it. I remembered walking home and getting in the bath and just thinking, I can't wait to do that again. Which
that was the situation that grabbed you. Yeah. So do you think that would have happened if that teacher hadn't have said that? And he
100% not.
So
100% not. It was what teaching is about. It's about creating that spark that turns into a fire.
Yeah.
And that stayed with me.
Yeah.
It's something that I've remembered vividly for so many years because of the impact that had on me. Just one sentence that he certainly wouldn't have remembered, but it changed the entire course of my life.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes even teachers don't even realise that they do that. But I had a couple of teachers that were the same, and it's like you remember them for not just the things they said, but how they approached you and how they inspired you by just even a small thing that made you feel wanted and appreciated, and give you that little tiny bit of confidence to push you on to that next stage. So that's great. It sounds like you had a fantastic schooling as well. Did you leave with what you wanted? Were you successful in school, or?
I did okay, and comparatively, in an East Leeds kind of comprehensive school, which certainly at that time wasn't a high achieving school. I did okay. I got a couple of A's. I got a couple of B's. I was not an outstanding student. I was all right. And, I didn't get any D's. Everything was C and above. So, I was doing okay there. Later on, my A levels didn't go well at all, but there were reasons for that. So, when the spark had been lit, very quickly I wanted to go and join a club because the school games weren't enough.
Yeah.
So I joined Kippax Welfare, which wasn't too far.
Kippax,
and I played at Kippax Welfare, and it was a big improvement in standards. It was tougher. It was.
Yeah.
I remember my first game was away at Normanton, and I was there with shoulder pads and gum shield, and absolutely no idea what was coming at me, and
all the gear, no idea.
Exactly that. So, but I got very much into that, and that became part of kind of a routine that I loved. But I'd played for 3 years, and one of those years I didn't get to play at all pretty much for most of the year because I broke my leg really quite early. And I came back, and I've been back for probably about 8-10 months, and we played West Bowling.
So what age are you at this point?
I am 15 now.
Right.
So we played at West Bowling, and a scout spoke to the coach, who then pointed him to me dad, and before I knew it, I was training at what was then Bradford Northern, now Bradford Bulls. And
so a lot of the viewers won't know about West Bowling and Bradford Northern and Bradford Bulls. I do, because I'm from that area and from that town. West Bowling was a very good team at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was one of the feeder clubs for Bradford Bulls, wasn't it? I mean, I've got friends that played for there, that went quite high, like Leon Price, I'm sure.
Yeah, he was at Queensbury. I don't know whether he played at Bowling at some point, but there was quite a lot of Bowling lads.
Quite a lot of lads that were there.
Yeah. Ricky Halliwell,
Ricky was there. Yeah. So obviously rugby was that big spark and that big thing that kind of grasped you, and you started to feel that kind of passion for that area. Obviously trying to progress and go through the ranks, and to get recognised as well by, it must have been a pretty big deal at the time to be scouted by Bradford Northern. How did that affect you, like, personally? What were the types of can you remember the types of conversations you were having with people at the time? I mean, were you 15, 16, or slightly older?
Yeah. I was 15 when I first went.
Yeah.
And at that time, the head coach was Peter Fox,
Right.
who, for anybody who knows the game, he's passed away now, but he was certainly a character who was really eccentric, really highly thought of in the game. He'd achieved everything that you could achieve in the British game. And he was very caring towards the young players, and he spoke to us a lot, and he was great. And at that time, the game was part-time, so the first teamers would be in for Tuesday and Thursday training. And the academy, we were just in the next room. So the first team were just the other side of the corridor, and we were there. And some of the kind of fringe first teamers was getting changed in our changing room. So there was people getting changed and showering that I'd seen on TV. Yeah. I was like, there was Derek Fox in the room, there was Paul Newlove in the room, there was Dave Watson and Trevor Clark, and John Hamer and Paul Medley, and it was just mind-blowing because I'd only ever seen these on TV. I was playing on park fields,
and suddenly here you are. What was the time period within that first proper game of rugby, and then being scouted?
3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Of which a year was lost.
Yeah. So that's quite an achievement, isn't it?
What it did mean, though, and this links into what I do now, there was so much that I just hadn't learned because I hadn't been playing long enough.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever shown me how to catch a ball properly, how to run lines and this, that and the other. I just did what I thought and did it the best I could, and that was enough to get me to that point.
Yeah.
And it's a time I look back on really fondly. Yeah. I've still got a huge kind of level of enthusiasm for the club.
Can you remember what types of conversations that you were having with people and people were having with you? Not just kind of within the rugby world, but kind of outside. Was there quite a lot of kind of excitement, and then, you know, was there anybody that was concerned, and people that were maybe giving you snippets of advice and what you should do? There's usually a lot of that, isn't there, in a situation like that?
Yeah, there is. And if I think back to Mr. Reed, the thing he said to me most of all was work hard at it, but don't forget what you're doing at school.
Yeah.
And you know, that was, we call it dual career now.
Yes.
And you know, it's a big subject area, but it was just wise words at the time.
Did you take his advice?
Not really.
No.
Not really. I didn't do it half as well at the A levels as I should have done. Because I just, when you're a kid, you're very impressionable and you just think that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You know, even though at that time when I first joined, they weren't even full time. They all had jobs. But that, you know, I was a kid and that's all I could see. What did change significantly was my social standing within school. So instead of being on that periphery group, all of a sudden I was cool. I was being mentioned in assemblies, and there were kids in younger years going, "Oh, he's at Bradford. He plays at Bradford."
So what? I mean, I know sometimes I find it difficult. I think, are we a similar age? I'm 45.
So. A bit older. I'm 47.
So I'm sorry, I'm 46, not 45. So I find it difficult to remember the details of I remember certain events and certain things. So what I'm asking you now is, I actually find it difficult to remember things like that myself. But do you remember, obviously going into that popular group, as you say, do you remember the benefits and the pitfalls of that? Were there any that affected you in any way? Obviously, some of the benefits of that popularity and in school, and that's quite important in it for a young person, but sometimes it can be a real negative as well, you know, eventually. So do you remember that experience and what that felt like at the time?
I remember that I didn't, or I don't think I'd changed with my closest friends. I certainly didn't with my mum and dad, because they knew who I was. They knew how I was. What changed was, I think I became a bit cocky and a bit arrogant. Yeah. You know, I had a bit of a skip in my step, and I probably gelled my hair a little bit more than I used to do, and
more interest from the girls.
Yeah, absolutely. and you know, there were possibly times when if I was made of chocolate, I could have eaten myself. You know, it was that self-confidence significantly increased.
But it's hard, isn't it? Because I suppose that's part of the game as well, isn't it? And part of that self-confidence can impact your game really positively. But I think it's, you know, socially in different situations, it might come across as being a bit arrogant or a bit. It's interesting. Do you think other people saw you like that? I know you're reflecting on it now 30 years later, but do you think other people saw you like that at the time? Did you get any kind of feedback where maybe friends that you were friends with weren't necessarily that keen on the new Tony?
I'm not sure at school, because it was quite a bubble that you're in. Later on, I went to university, and I had a kind of an air about me at university that was still there, because, you know, I was one of the better players that were there. I was on the sports science course. I was picked for Great Britain students, and that carried through. But what I was acutely aware of, that it was all a bit of a mask. It was all a bit of a charade, because in the 3.5-4 years that I had at Bradford, and then, you know, later on in what I've done, I've always had this kind of perception of imposter syndrome. Yeah, where I've struggled to understand how I'm there. Yeah, how have I got here?
Do you still have it a bit now?
I've got it right now. I'm sat at a table with a microphone doing a podcast. Yeah. And if I'm doing a podcast, that means it's for people to listen to. Yeah. Like, who wants to listen to that? Yeah. So constantly. Yeah,
I'm similar. Every time I deliver training, you know, I might deliver training to 100 people in a room, but right before that, or the couple of days before that, I'm always a bit kind of, you know, and it is imposter syndrome, and it comes from, you know, what the hell am I doing in this place? You know, and what. I get that. So you've given us a little glimpse there into, I mean, I should have told the audience before why you're actually here. And I suppose what the audience will understand now is that, you know, everyone comes onto this that have experienced something in their life that's affected them. I think you've kind of touched on that mask and that bit of imposter syndrome and that self-doubt and things like that. So the reason we are here today is to talk, and I'm so glad you've come on as well, is to talk about mental health and to talk about your experience of mental health and how that affected you, with the hope really that we'll be able to help other men that have been in a similar situation, families as well that maybe would watch this and go, well, actually, we're going through something very similar with one of our family members at the moment, or with my husband or my brother or whatever, whoever it is. So if you're okay, I mean, it's really great to understand that you had this fantastic childhood and, you know, adolescence and then this professional sports experience as well that you had. But it's interesting to know that somebody with all that would be perceived success would have a situation like you had. Now, without me jumping too far ahead, I just wondered if you could start to talk about, you know, kind of what happened, what you believe led to that as well. So I don't know if you want to give us kind of your age at the time and what you were doing at the time, a little bit of an intro into your life at that particular time, and then maybe talk us through what happened, you know, at your own pace.
Yeah. So I kind of this aspect of the story really starts probably about, you know, the year 2000, so, you know, 24 years ago. So I've completed university. I've done my sports science degree. I remembered thinking that there would be a flurry of job offers once I'd finished, and that just didn't materialise. So that kind of knocked me off my step a little bit. And after about 6 months and sending loads of CVs about, I got a job working in football as a football development officer at North Riding County FA. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. Pay was pretty poor, but it was a start. It was a foot on the ladder. And then a lot of things changed significantly, because I got a letter from Halifax Rugby League Club, then known as the Blue Sox. And that was the first of a few happy accidents. So Halifax wanted somebody to lead their youth development system, but they also didn't have a lot of money. So I was available, I was enthusiastic, I was willing, and crucially, I was cheap. So I went down and spoke to the club and agreed to join. So December 99, started looking for somewhere to live in Halifax. Shared a house with some other people who come out of university who were working in marketing and community development at the club. Because then at that point, the Super League brought in standards of what clubs needed to do. So I went in as youth development manager. And they didn't have very much at all. So I was coaching the junior academy, working on recruitment, setting up the age group sides that were referred to as the service areas and the scholarship program, trying to build relationships with the local community game. And then there was item 12 on the job description that was any other duties, and that included playing for the under-21s as an overage player. It involved writing the program. It occasionally involved doing the PA on a match day. It involved being dressed up as a mascot if that's what was needed. There was all sorts. So I was 80 hours at the club, but it became a way of life, and I really enjoyed that. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with this. All I knew that I was at a full-time rugby league club. My whole life evolved around what we were doing there, and it was just great fun.
How were the club doing at the time?
They were doing all right. They weren't troubling the playoffs, but they weren't, threatened with relegation either.
And the reason I ask that is, like, sometimes environment can be significant, can't it? If you're in a really stressful, anxious environment, that can have an impact on you, can't it?
Well, the stress that came from the environment was down to money. The club just didn't have any money. And when I first got there, we were paid by a check, and you had to work training around when you got your checks. You had to go straight down to the bank, because if you were last, then the money had run out and you'd have to go knocking on a director's door to go and get it. So those were the times that we were in. And the academy won a trophy. Things were going really well. Steve Linnane was the head coach at the time, an Australian who'd coached at Rochdale, and he said, I need some help. So he wanted me to go and help him. So I was like at first team training, then academy training, and this, that, and the other. And it all seemed to be going really well. Then Steve was sacked after we got absolutely hammered at St Helens. Tony Anderson came in. He spoke with me. He's like, I've seen the great work you've done. No change from me. And then 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting and told that because of the club's financial situation, I was redundant. Wow. And that was it. And
so how long had you been there at that point?
I'd been there 4 years.
Wow. So doing 80 hours a week?
Yeah. And I just signed a new 2-year contract, and that was in the bin because my post was redundant.
What other pressures did you have? Were you still renting? Had you bought somewhere? Or what?
I was renting at the time.
Still renting?
Yeah, I was renting at the time. So, you lick your wounds and you kind of think, well, what am I going to do next? And when I did my dissertation, I did that on psychological profiling of professional players. And I went through all of the clubs alphabetically, contacting them, going through the directory and ringing them up. There was people didn't use emails too much at that time. It was, you pick up the phone and I got to D and I rang Dewsbury. And it was actually Neil Kelly who answered the phone. I didn't know that he'd answered the phone. And I ended up doing my dissertation on Dewsbury Rams players. But then Neil had then gone to Widnes. So the media manager at Halifax took a call from Widnes saying that could they have my number because they'd heard I'd been made redundant and there might be an opportunity there. There was another couple of clubs that had shown some interest as well. But because the redundancy at Halifax had hit me quite hard, I thought I needed something else because I didn't want to feel like I'd felt that time. And the big attraction of Widnes was they agreed to give me time to do a part-time PGCE at John Moores to train to be a PE teacher.
Brilliant. So just before you move on to Widnes, how did it affect you? What at the time, can you remember the feelings, the thoughts at that time of being sat in that room and hearing that news of a club that you'd put 4 years of really hard work into? Obviously now thinking back, you're quite reflective about it and you understood the club's position, but what were those feelings and emotions at the time?
I think it made me feel really fragile. It made me, it stripped away any of that air of arrogance of being bulletproof. It just took all that away and made me realise that ultimately we're all just employees and, your work will replace you very, very quickly.
That cog in the wheel situation, isn't it?
Yeah. But I was reminded, and I mentioned this before we started recording, about, be nice to people on the way up, you need them on the way down. And that's been a mantra that I've always carried with me.
Yeah.
And I'd obviously left an impression on Neil for him, 4 or 5 years later to get in touch and want to bring me on board.
Yeah.
It was a big change in terms of, it was the first time I was leaving Yorkshire and coming to the Northwest, and I originally thought, well, I'll do it for a year. Yeah, I'll just do it for a year. So I rented. And it was still the 70, 80 hours a week, but then there was also the 10, 15 hours a week on top of that, doing me lesson plans for my teaching practices.
Yeah.
Because I had teaching practice first at St Peter and Paul in Widnes and then at St Chad's in Runcorn.
Yeah.
So when you've been at the club all day and you've done academy training at night and you get back and you eat and it's like 9:30 and then you're starting writing lesson plans, they were long old days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been there myself when I've done like my masters and, even in child protection, and coming home and thinking I'm gonna love doing this because it's an area that I'm really passionate about. The reality is something very different, isn't it? You're absolutely knackered, aren't you, and wiped out, and you just energy wise, you really struggle.
But at the same time, I don't know very many people at all who have been successful who haven't had a period like that.
Yeah.
Where you are doing what feels like thankless work for hour after hour after hour, and you feel like you don't want to do that anymore, and everybody else is having a better time than you, but you're putting in the hard yards that'll pay off later.
Yeah.
you know, and quicker than I thought, I was offered a teaching post. It was one of those situations where it's not what you know, it's who you know. So I was in the bar area after a Widnes game, and there was a season ticket holder there who at the time was the head teacher at the Heath in Runcorn. And he said, come and see me. He said, I want to get rugby league going at the school. He says, there's no rugby league over in Runcorn. He says, so I want to get it going. He says, you'd be perfect. So I was invited to an interview. And when I had the interview, he actually just was sat on the edge of a tractor where the bloke who was cutting the grass, and he was chatting to him and just waved to me. It was very loose. He'd kind of, pretty much made his mind up.
Yeah.
And because I'd got that opportunity to get a teaching job really quickly, I took that and thought, well, I'll continue coaching. I'm still playing, but continue coaching part-time, but I had to take that teaching opportunity.
So were you working full-time as a teacher, and then were you part-time at Widnes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So again, doing a lot of hours.
Oh, ridiculous hours.
Yeah.
Ridiculous hours.
So sorry to interrupt you, Tony. So obviously you had that big setback, didn't you, at what was the club?
Halifax.
At Halifax,
Yep.
sorry. You had that big setback at Halifax, picked yourself back up, moved to the northwest, got the opportunity at Widnes, and then suddenly these other things started coming around. Was there anything that you did around that time of picking yourself up? I suppose what I'm trying to get to is there's been moments in your life where you've had setbacks, you've picked yourself up. How did you do that? What was happening at the time? Because you've then got yourself back up to kind of, near to where you want to be, I suppose, when you've got your full-time teaching job.
Well, there was what I describe as two versions of me. There was the version that was outwardly facing that everybody else knew, and then there was me.
Yeah.
And the bit that everybody knew was the teacher who, because of circumstance, I ended up being the head of PE really quite quickly because the head of PE was ill.
At the Heath
long
School?
term, yeah. And she was a wonderful lady who sadly passed away, and I was propelled into leading the department in actually my first year of teaching.
Yeah. Which is tough anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your first year of
Yeah.
teaching.
And I got an award as, I think it was Northwest New Teacher of the Year, 2006, something like that. So for everybody who was looking in, they're like, oh, it's flying.
He's absolutely flying.
But the reality was I went home to be on my own, and home was nothing like how I wanted it to be, and did not match at all anything like it was at work, whether that was at a school or a rugby club.
So it's that real contrast of
Yeah.
being busy and liked in work, accepted. People are identifying you for promotions. It's all really positive. And then you're coming home and there's something different. What was so different about home then compared to? I know what you're saying. It's the busyness of work, isn't it? And that you're around people, aren't you? Thousands of people. When you're in a school. So what was it about home then that was such a contrast to that then? Why did it affect you?
Well, there were a couple of factors. The first one was I knew I probably would go into thousands of people, or at least 1,000 people. I knew so many people, but had no friends.
Yeah.
And there was a big difference in that. It's like everybody, Widnes is a small town. Everywhere you went, somebody knew me.
Yeah.
And I would know who they were, but they weren't my friend.
No.
And if I did have a night off, I'd be kind of thinking, right, what am I going to do? Because I wasn't close enough to anybody that they were my friend. And we'll get onto this later on. There was another reason why that was particularly pertinent. The other thing was I became a dad in 2006, and my son's mum, who is brilliant, absolutely fantastic, an incredible mum, but we weren't in a relationship,
Yeah.
that you would particularly describe as a relationship. So
saying that we're in a moment where we're ready to have a child. I don't think you're ever ready to have a child, but it was, it wasn't that type of relationship necessarily.
We didn't expect that was the route our lives were going to take, and I didn't react particularly well at all to that. Much to my regret and frustration, and eventually, like, I improved in that regard, and his mum is was and still is incredible. And I've got a very good relationship there, but it wasn't conventional. It wasn't what I'd have particularly designed. And that probably just added to my frustration. Nothing at home in any regard matched what I was experiencing in terms of career. So it was a complete contrast. And I made some bad choices. I got involved in relationships at work. Just don't do that. And almost the more I tried, the worse things got. And I was deeply unhappy with what that picture looked like.
Do you remember thinking that at the time? I'm deeply unhappy, or is that something you look back on on reflection and say, were you recognising that in yourself? I know sometimes, people that experience depression and anxiety, they can recognise that in themselves straight away, but some people don't recognise, so they don't know the triggers, they don't know really what's happening to them at that particular time, but then they reflect back on it later on and realise that's maybe what it was. Do you think that happened with you, or do you think you knew at the time exactly how you were feeling?
I think around kind of 2007, 2008, I was trying to create this version of a life that I'd pre-planned in my head. It wasn't working, but I actually felt that it was everybody else's fault. It wasn't mine. Everybody else was letting me down. I don't think that now.
No.
I think I was making a catalogue of poor decisions. And I got to 2009, I took another job in Manchester, almost that kind of video game mentality of, right, I'm just going to press off and reset it and start again. But it didn't, because that's how my life was, and it didn't reset and it didn't improve, and it just continued. And life became even more lonely, because if I did make any connections with people who might be my friends, they were in Manchester, and I'm still living 30, 40 minutes away. And I was, this time of year, I was getting up, driving to work in the dark, coming home in the dark. It was, not a great existence, to be honest. And then another relationship that I thought I really wanted, but on reflection, I didn't. But I was just clinging to, it's going to be better because everybody around me's got this better life than I have. And then came up to Christmas 2010. Another relationship had broken down. Christmas was coming. It was going to be another Christmas whereby I'm just not going to be anywhere near what I want this to look like. I'm not going to be in people's company. I'm going to spend a lot of time on my own. I remember probably for 2, maybe 3 consecutive New Year's Eves, I went to IKEA and bought furniture to build. New
Year's Eve. Yeah.
So I had something to do, rather than sit there and think everybody else is doing something and I'm not.
Do you think you had other options? Because I know when you're talking like this, I'm thinking, and maybe our viewers will think as well, what about like your family and friends at home, where you come from, your bread and butter, your mum, your dad, people you went to school with, that type of thing. Did you feel at the time like, obviously you spent those 3 New Year's Eves where you were doing, did you not try and reach out to them, or did you not want to?
I didn't reach out to anybody because I didn't want them to know the truth.
Yeah.
Because they believe that external perception.
Yeah.
That I'm being really successful, everything's going great.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Tony. Tony's popular. Tony's got loads of friends.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
So that
want
idea in
break.
some way that you had failed in some way, and you had
100%.
to speak to them about
100%.
that, and had to
It was an absolute feeling of failure, and the harder I tried, the worse it became. And then, so as we approached Christmas 2010, I started to struggle to sleep. I just had too many things going on in my mind. And the way I was helping myself get off to sleep was to drink.
Yeah.
Now, I've never had a drink problem. I was medicating using drink, but on occasions I'd wake up on the kitchen floor in my PE kit, brush my teeth, drag a comb through my hair and just go back in.
Go into work.
And eventually that became noticeable that my performance was poor.
Yeah, because it's not sustainable, is it?
No. And then I was signed off for a period just before Christmas. And it was, I remember the deputy head saying, look, go back home, take some time out, believing that maybe this was a short-term issue.
Yeah.
And I went back to where I was living, didn't go home. And then 2 days later decided I was absolutely fine. And I came back in. And the reason I came back in was because it was the Works Christmas do that night. So if I went to the Works Christmas do, people thought I was all right.
You could project that
Yes.
you were okay.
But I was pretty much as far from all right as it's possible to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, without going into too much detail in this, that night I got absolutely blathered, went back to my hotel room and tried to take my own life. You know, and may well have succeeded if, you know, my colleagues who mean a lot to me still now, at that, you know, the colleagues I had at that time, came and found me. But that episode then started a process whereby, in retrospect, I think I hit the bottom. And then the rebuilding started because you can't pretend anymore.
So obviously we've talked about this before the podcast. We don't need to go into any detail of the actual incident, but what I'm interested in is, and we've talked about this as well, is obviously you're intoxicated just before, so that wouldn't be you know, whether you talked about that or not, it wouldn't really be a fair reflection of how you were really feeling because you'd be influenced by, you know, alcohol. But do you remember even before you went out how you were feeling?
Yeah.
I don't know, you felt almost kind of propelled that you were, you know, that you were going to have to be there. Almost like you had this conviction that I'm going to be there despite what I'm thinking. So you felt that almost a pressure on yourself to be there. Do you remember how you felt like even going into that environment? And
I remember quite clearly the build up to the evening. So because I didn't live too close, and a few people were staying in a local hotel, and as I was getting ready, I had a bottle of wine. Now, I don't really drink wine.
No,
but the viewpoint there was, I'm gonna go in, and I will have my inhibitions gone, and I am going to be the most fun person there, that everybody is going to have fun with and think he's great. And in truth, I probably cut a pretty tragic figure. I remembered like dancing manically because I was trying to purport that I'm fun, mate. I'm having fun. And you know, I dread to think what I actually did look like. Thank God nobody had camera phones at that point.
Yeah.
You know, 2010, probably they did, but certainly not like they are now.
do you think, thinking back, that some people knew, you know, they've seen the decline in your performance,
Yeah.
you'd been off for a little bit?
I think some people probably pitied me a little bit, thought I was a bit of an idiot, you know. Certainly didn't understand the depths of what were going on.
No.
Because I got bundled into a taxi and, you know,
Yeah.
kind of sent home.
On your own.
Yeah.
Vulnerable in that sense.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But friends who were there, one in particular, who I know you know very well, was kind of, something's not right here. We need to just go and check. So they jumped in a taxi to go to the hotel themselves, and, you know, thank God they did, really.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned there before that was your bottom, you know, that was you at the bottom, which would be for anybody, you know. So the days after then, what emotions were you going through? Did you, what were you saying to yourself? I suppose the reason I'm asking this is there'll be people watching this that have dealt with something similar, or where they've had a family member that they've watched that decline, and nobody's ever quite done anything or done, and you were very close to, to that being as serious as you can get, weren't you? Do you remember how you what you said to yourself after the event, if you like? So the next day, what emotions you were going through, what you said to yourself, who said what to you, that type of thing. Do you remember? I suppose what I'm always interested in these situations is the interactions afterwards. How do you now, from that, start to rebuild yourself? Do you know what I mean?
Because it was just before Christmas, there was naturally this kind of social lull as everybody returns to their families and their loved ones. So I kind of sunk into that. But what that actually meant was I was sat in my mum and dad's front room.
Yeah.
So there was plenty of time watching reruns of Only Fools and Horses, just reflecting. And I felt a real kind of deep shame.
Yeah.
And deep embarrassment, because I was aware that, there was a period in hospital first before that happened, but I was aware that there was no way I was keeping this quiet.
Yeah.
It wasn't that the people who knew particularly were, running around telling tales, but this was not going to be a secret.
People were aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, then occupational health from work got in touch, and I was initially signed off for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Heavily medicated. I remember how much the medication made my feet and my hands itch. Yeah. So I spent most of that Christmas just rubbing my hands and my feet because they were very itchy.
So tell me about, I know you've got a really close relationship with your mum and dad. I've met your mum and dad, haven't I? What were they saying to you? Because I know they are really supportive. They were obviously aware. What were they saying to you? What were the things, in the days afterwards?
Well, they had no idea that was where I was at until, that had happened.
Yeah.
So there was an enormous amount of shock.
Yeah.
There was an enormous amount of shock, and they were asking a lot of questions. And I know, looking back, they were asking a lot of questions of themselves, going, well, what have we done wrong?
Yeah.
And they'd done nothing wrong.
No.
They'd done nothing at all. But they were hugely supportive. They just wanted me to just feel as wrapped around and supported and loved as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody who was a greater friend than I gave them credit for at the time just said, I hope you realise now that this is not about other people. This is about, you have to take time for you.
Yeah.
Because I remembered saying to them, I've been signed off for 6 months. This feels like a prison sentence. And if I just get through that 6 months, then I can go back to work.
Do you think in a way that compounds you feeling, because it sounds to me from speaking to you in detail about this, that your own biggest critic, if you like, and you put more pressure on yourself than anybody puts on you. Do you feel that them doing that at that time put a lot of pressure on you, and you felt maybe even more of a failure in that sense, or you felt it felt even more impounded of how you felt?
Well, as somebody who spent the previous decade and more doing 60, 70, 80 hours a week, to then be in a position whereby I was offered some NHS therapy, but there wasn't a great deal. So we started digging into some savings and getting some private therapy as well.
Yeah.
And to go from being that busy to having objectives that were based around, okay, today I want you to make sure you've had a wash, make sure you eat, preferably with something green in it, and try, if you can, go for a walk.
Yeah.
They're 3 pretty basic objectives for a day.
And were you struggling with those things at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I struggled
Even after the
for
event.
the first month. It felt very alien, to the point where I created a routine for myself of, if I managed to do it, I got a Domino's pizza on a Friday and went to Blockbuster and got 3 DVDs.
Love the Blockbuster days.
Yeah.
Love the Blockbuster days.
Because that was the reward for what I've done that week. And it felt very bizarre. But I think it was some of the best advice I'd ever received, that if you burn your candle at both ends and you take no time for what actually matters to you, eventually you're going to fall off a cliff. That cliff might look different for different people and how it eventuates, but you're going to crash eventually.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, is it, at that level, that many hours for that length of time? Like you say, 10 years working at that level. What percentage of that, of your working life, do you think had led to that? You know, like, so obviously, what percentage of the issue, if you like, was you being just completely burnt out?
Well,
I know it's hard for me to say, put a percentage on it, but, you know, was it 80% burnout? Was it other stuff that were personal? What would you kind of, how would you kind of describe that now?
I'd created a mental model of what my life should be like. It wasn't like that. I felt I couldn't control it. And I just tried harder and harder and harder, to the point of physical and mental exhaustion, and just imploded. Trying to create a life that I wanted it to be like.
Just that pressure upon pressure upon pressure.
Yeah.
It's funny you should say imploded, because as you were speaking there, that's what I was thinking. Like, you know, physical implosion, you know, a mental implosion. So, you know, it sounds like you had a pretty tough time. What happened then? So, you know, fast forward 2 or 3 months. Where were you at? Did you go back to work? Did you?
So during the first half of 2011, I was signed off work. And slowly but surely that routine started to become a little bit more elaborate, where I was training and I got back playing. And that was all fine. I was allowed to do that, even though I wasn't in work. I could still do that. And, you know, occupational therapy from Trafford Council, who were the employers at the time, they were very supportive. Continued with the private therapy, which cost loads, took such a massive dent in savings, but I think it was important at the time. And slowly started to build up a new start, which reflected on looking after me first. Because actually what it did was it took away all the other stuff that I was doing, because I was signed off from it.
Yeah.
So
although it took you probably a while to get used to that, I suppose eventually you started to value that.
I learned how to fill time productively.
Yeah.
You know, which I struggled with at first.
Yeah.
Really struggled. And then eventually when I did get back to work, it was on like a phased return. So it was the next academic year before I was fully into it.
Yeah.
And I was on medication for probably 2-3 years, and eventually weaned myself off that. But I wasn't in a rush to do that, because I viewed that, having spoken to people, as almost like some crutches or stabilizers on a bike. You know, you don't need them forever, but
could you feel it working? I've never taken medication for anything like that, so I couldn't really comment on it. But did you feel that it worked?
Well,
that aspect, because it's not quite often. It's the combination of therapeutic and medicine, isn't it?
What
the
I
best
thought
combination.
It did do was it stabilised emotions, as opposed to things being really high and then really low.
Yeah.
It meant that they were more consistent.
Yeah.
My emotions. So when I did eventually get back to work, you know, I'd missed most of the that 12-month period with the phased return. When I did go back in, I did feel kind of, it was almost like time for a complete restart and a fresh start.
Did people allow you to do that, do you feel? Were people supportive in work?
They did, But I'd made some decisions that I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. Right. So as part of filling me time, I discovered this psychologist who'd passed away in the 50s called Alan Watts. And I read some of his stuff because I did a lot of reading. Like, I filled my time reading, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I read some of his stuff, and it appears quite a lot on YouTube, this video, and it's like, what if money were no object? So he goes, if money doesn't exist, what would you do with your time? And then if you're thinking about your career, do that. Because if you do it enough and you work hard enough at it, eventually somebody will pay you for it.
Yeah.
And don't chase the money, chase the enjoyment.
Yeah.
And as long as you earn enough money to get by, that's all you need.
Yeah.
So don't chase wealth with this. So I'd made a decision that, I wanted to leave teaching. I wanted to leave. And it wasn't because of the children. I loved working with the kids.
What do you think it was?
It was the system.
Yeah.
It was the system, and how the system, and particularly the head teacher I worked at the time, wanted to count everything that mattered to his reputation and very little of what mattered to the kids.
Yeah.
So
so the culture for you was wrong there as well. So you were like, you didn't feel.
We did so much work to help through the medium of physical activity and sport, keeping kids in school.
Yeah.
So that they then get other qualifications.
It was a tough old school, wasn't it, as well,
yeah.
in a really diverse, tough community. With
So
issues.
There was one particular kid who was at the verge of exclusion, and we lit a spark, which like had happened to me, through sport, and he wanted to do GCSE PE. Now we weren't going to particularly get a great grade out of him. We got a pass.
Yeah,
we just got a pass, and that was deemed as like a failure on the spreadsheet.
Yeah,
that brought our average grade down. Well, actually, that kept him in school and gave him some direction. He went on to college, and there were options for him moving forward.
It's probably more important, if anything, with a child like that was achieved.
And that wasn't counted. It was valued by the kids. It was valued by people in the school. But when it came to the crunch, so the system kind of broke me, really.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I thought about, well, what is it that I do like? And I love my rugby league. I love working in that environment. But I wanted to do that in a slightly different way, where I wasn't working to the point of exhaustion.
So you knew now that way of life was not sustainable. You couldn't do that again.
I needed balance.
Yeah, you couldn't go back to what you were doing.
Yeah.
So you loved the area of rugby league, but you wanted something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to what you do now, and how you help and support people, and I've got a few things to mention as well of other ways that you help and support people. What did you learn about yourself and the people around you during that really challenging, difficult period where the incident happened? What did you learn the most about yourself after the coming months after that, and 6 to 12 months, if you like, and the people around you as well? So just before we move on.
So learning about myself was that I am something that should be looked after. Not me specifically, but as people, we have to value self-care.
Yeah.
And I think we don't, because we're constantly doing the next thing. Yeah. There'll be people who are listening to this who are thinking, I've got to do the shopping, then I've got to sort tea out, then I've got to sort the uniforms out, and then I've got to tidy round because so-and-so's happening, and then I need to get me work stuff ready for tomorrow. And you're constantly working towards the next thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
But that becomes this kind of cycle of terror if there's no point where you're actually doing something that's for you.
Yeah.
And you're not having some self-care within that.
Yeah. So obviously that before this happened, and it leading up to this, that wasn't something that was on your agenda. Not something you ever did, But it's taken something like this for you to really value that, and that idea of actually stopping for a minute or a few hours or a couple of days or whatever it is, and actually regenerating, not rejuvenating.
And in terms of other people, I kind of learnt to categorize them. So I firmly believe, and somebody else has said this, and I've pinched it from them, but I don't know who it is, so I can't credit them for it. But there are two types of people in the world. There are sponges and there are radiators. And the sponges will take something from you, and the radiators will give something to you. So whenever you meet people and you're in people's company, work out, are they a sponge or are they a radiator? And then spend a lot more time with the radiators. Because the sponge is not going to disappear, but spend less time with them.
Is it okay? Can people be both, do you think?
They can be at times, but
they're overriding.
It's social interaction's a transaction, isn't it? It's like, what am I going to get out of spending time with this person? Am I going to get more than I am having to give myself? If I am, then I want to be near that person more often.
Yeah.
Because there are so many good people around who want to do things to help you because it makes them feel good too.
Yeah.
And they want to do it for no reward other than the reward of seeing you happy. So, let them, welcome them into your life and, spend time with the good people.
Are you, do you struggle with people praising you at all?
I think I'd probably ignore it.
Yeah.
That's their opinion, and it's like, there might be a reason why they're doing it. If I've done something that they like, that might not necessarily be the right thing, but I've done something that they like.
Yeah.
I think my own review of myself is more important, because they might say they don't like something, but if I've done it for the right reasons, and I'm satisfied that I did that for the right reason.
I'm like that. Like, people say to me sometimes, "Oh, you've done that, it's brilliant," and I just almost kind of fob it. Oh yeah, thanks, and I don't really take it in and accept it, and that's a bit like yourself, where you're quite harsh with yourself. You won't go, actually, I did a great job there. I've done a good thing here, and I do good things every day for people. Like whether it's people I work with or people, friends, or children that I work with, but I'd very rarely give myself credit for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're the same as that or whether
you're
quite self-critical.
I do think of that phrase quite a lot about self-praise is no praise.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've got to be comfortable in your own skin. You've got to look in the mirror and be happy with what that person's done.
Yeah.
That's looking back at you.
Yeah.
So that's significant.
Yeah.
But hey, look, I work in sport, so you're never going to please everybody. Everybody's got an opinion in sport, so you just got to get used to that.
So before we talk about your work and what you do now, are there any people that stood out while you were going through that? Anybody, you don't have to name names, but any people that really surprised you, that really helped you, that actually by you opening up and being honest and talking really about how you were doing and how you were feeling and really being vulnerable, are there any people that stood out that kind of really,
Yeah, there are people in times of crisis who will go, "Oh, that's terrible," when they hear and do nothing. There are people who will use it as fuel for gossip.
Yeah.
And they're definitely sponges. But there are a couple of people, and these are a smaller minority, but those are the people who step forward and are proactive and want to do something to support you. And they are gold dust. They are the really important people. There's somebody you and I are both very close to that falls into that category. Jill is exactly that. She was a day-to-day colleague at that time, and was in the immediate period before I got signed off. She was the one like listening to my ramblings and just going,
taking it all in, probably.
But I was an absolute sponge to her, draining her. But when I needed some support, she was knocking on the door, literally.
Yeah.
Like, what can I do? How can I help you?
Yeah.
And you know, there are you stumble across those people in your life, and you just got to make sure you value them.
And it doesn't matter what happens and where you go and what direction you're going, you will always have that bond and that connection with that person.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that, isn't it? I've got one or two like that, and it doesn't matter. I cannot see them for 10 years. But you need to make more effort, don't you, with people like that, and actually spending more time with them. I'm as guilty as that myself. Well, thank you so much for that part, and I know that was very personal, and you just sound like you're really reflective of that time, and it was a really horrible, difficult, challenging time at the time, as it would have been for anybody, but it just feels like it's made you so self-aware of the situation and of people and of, you know, your career and what's important and what's not important in life. So for me, you know, it although it's absolutely awful to go through, I just wonder if you hadn't have experienced that, if you would be who you are today. Do you know what I mean? And do you think about that?
Yeah, I've thought.
I'm not saying you should be grateful for it, but you know,
if a time machine existed, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't change a single thing.
No,
and that's hard, because me at that time would have given anything to make it different. But we are a product of our experiences, good and bad.
Yeah.
And as long as you move forward from it in a positive manner and take what you can from it, then everything's not lost.
Yeah.
And as long as, even though I didn't think it at that very moment in time, as long as there's a tomorrow, there's something you can do.
Of course, yeah.
You know? So I made that decision that, you know, I was going to look for something outside teaching. I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be.
Yeah.
I thought about rugby options. So I just put some feelers out, and I inquired into various different things, looked at the charity sector, looked at anything that might catch me my eye. And we got to Christmas 2013, maybe early 2014, and I got a phone call from a guy called John Roberts. John Roberts was performance director at England Rugby League at the time. And he said, we are looking for somebody who knows rugby league player development systems and knows education. And there's not too many people who know that. So we had a couple of chats and this, that, and the other. And he said, what do you earn? So I told him, and he went, we ain't got that. So it was then that I reflected on that Alan Watts stuff. So I'm going to have to take a fairly hefty pay cut here, because by that time I got to senior leadership. What do I want to do that's going to fulfill me, that I'm going to be excited about? So, you know, I made the decision, yep, that's what I'm going to do. It was the hardest sell was to my granddad, who thought that, as he calls it, being a schoolmaster is the greatest of all professions. That's like a proper job.
Very traditional. And old school.
That's a proper job. But I convinced him that he'll be all right, and he was all right. And he ends up, at the end of this story, or the more recent as, he ends up really happy. So I'll tell you why in a sec. But so yeah, I joined England Rugby League, and I'll be honest, I just loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. I was working with a number of clubs. My work-life balance was better because I was home-based. So I didn't have a commute. I did a lot of miles, you know, going from club to club and this, that, and the other. And I was working hard and putting hours in. But going back to the Alan Watts stuff, I was doing what I would do if I was a multimillionaire. I would have been volunteering my time to do that type of stuff for fun. So I was getting paid for what I really enjoyed doing.
Well.
And eventually worked off my meds. And I wanted to put something back. So I spoke about, you know, what we've talked about now, to try and support people who might be experiencing mental health challenges.
So was that to children and adults, or?
Yeah. So occasionally children. So I'd be asked to go into some schools, and I did that.
'Cause that must have been quite kind of progressive at the time, because what year are we talking now? When you started?
2014 when I started in
so
rugby
10
league.
years ago.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
males talking about mental health, and I would consider that to be quite progressive at that time.
Well,
going into schools, especially
the
and talking
charity
about-
Rugby League Cares had a project which they still have, the Offload Project,
Yeah.
which were a network of kind of predominantly men who had an opportunity to just talk about what they were experiencing and how they were feeling. So I started just volunteering, going and doing some talks there, predominantly at Widnes, and Sean Mellor was really good in getting me involved in that. And I did more and more of that, and I wanted to test myself. So one of the things I did a walk from Hull to Widnes, calling in at all the rugby league clubs to raise money for mental health charities.
How much did you raise?
We raised about $5,500 on that one.
Brilliant.
And then I did it on a bike. Didn't get as much though, because I got that done in 2 days, whereas it was a full week when I was walking. Harder than I thought as well.
What's interesting about you as well, I'm pretty good at observing people. I think you mentioned something like that that's, I think, quite a big thing. To walk from Hull to Widnes is like, if I did that, I'd be like, this is massive. But you almost kind of just skip over it and go, yeah, I'll just walk to Hull and Widnes, and
Well, I thought that how hard can just walking all day be?
Yeah.
But by the time it was probably when I got to Halifax, I was starting the day for the first 20 minutes on crutches until the stiffness had gone and I got going.
Yeah.
It was a slog. I remember being sat in a park in Warrington. I'd planned to finish at Warrington's ground and I just didn't quite make it one day, and I just sat down and I can't do any more. It was far harder than I thought, but we got it done.
What were the miles on that? It must have been a couple of hundred.
178 miles.
Yeah.
Because of the routes going to all the clubs.
Over the Pennines.
So it was 178 miles, and it was a dead hot week, so that was hard work.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing.
So, things are really, really good working with the RFL, and I really enjoyed it. And I went to a conference in Cardiff and presented some of the work that we were doing. And I met a bloke called David Faulkner, and David Faulkner, he was actually a gold medal winner in the Seoul Olympics for men's hockey. So that famous Barry Davis thing, where were the Germans and frankly, who cares? Well, in that game, when they won the gold medal, David was in that squad. But he had just been appointed as Director of Performance for Women's Football at the FA. And he spoke about a job and said, I'd like you to apply. He says, and, we'd like to, consider your application. So I was invited to apply. Kind of a bit skeptically, I did. And then I found myself at London at Wembley, speaking to them about that. And then I was offered it. And this was a big leap of faith because I was leaving the sport that I knew. So
what, we're talking 2014, 15?
No,
or?
this was now to the back end of... so this is 2017. Yeah, 2017.
So still, thinking about women's football where it is now, it wasn't anywhere near that in 17, was it?
So the Super League had existed, but it was going fully professional from 2018.
Yeah. What made you decide to do that?
The same thing that made me go to rugby practice at school when Mr. Reid said, I think you'll be all right at this. It was, we know how big football is. I'm at Wembley and the FA are going, there's a job here and we'd like you to do it. And I thought, well, if they believe in me, maybe I should too. Yeah. And I thought I would regret it if I didn't find out. So, my remit was pretty simple, but to describe, but not to do. It was to set up the academy system for the Women's Super League. They did have a system of sorts, but it needed massively accelerating. And I had to brief people. I remember the dates. It was the 28th of February at Wembley. I had to brief all the chief executives of the Super League clubs as to what it was going to look like, and it was going to kick off that September.
So pretty big stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So and we're not talking grassroots clubs. You know, Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea, Liverpool. They were all in the room.
Yeah. A lot of pressure.
But I just gave it my best shot. And you know, long story short, I spent just short of 8 years at the FA. Learned a lot. Had a lot of great experiences. Scored a goal at Wembley in a staff game. You know. Which was probably the highlight of the 8 years for me, not for everybody else. But and then a similar thing happened whereby somebody said, "There's a job here, and we'd like you to apply because you know we think you'd be a good fit." And that was with the ECB, England Wales Cricket Board, and I've been there 6 months doing a very similar thing.
Yeah,
we're working.
So you're working your way around the sports, aren't you? Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that I don't keep moving sports, but I've done rugby league for a million years. I did 7.5 years in women's football at the FA. So and now 6 months in at England cricket, and I don't think there's that many people who've got to wear an England tracksuit in a formal capacity in 3 sports.
No,
there's a few who've done it in 2, but not 3. So
yeah, I think that's quite
for that kid who didn't get picked to play in PE.
Yeah, that was on the second team.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great, and I think you must reflect on what could have been as well, and with regards to that critical incident, if you like, and what you've achieved since that as well. And that must be really kind of heartwarming for you and for your family and your friends and people that were around you at your lowest point, and what you've gone on to achieve, and that says a lot, I think, about your resilience and about your determination and your motivation.
I know at that time I couldn't see what was coming next.
Yeah.
I'm now married to Kristin.
Yeah.
I have twin boys who are now 7. I'm working in a job that I'm very excited to be in. I didn't know any of that when I was in the hotel room.
No.
I didn't know what was coming. Now, the only guarantee is if you carry that out, you do know what's coming. And that's nothing.
Yeah.
So we just don't know what the next phase is, and we've got to hang on in there to find out. Because kind of the twist in all this tale is that there was a consistent belief that I had suffered from poor mental health. And I don't think I did, because what happened then was my eldest son, who's now will be 19 in January. That's flown. And one of the twins, they are autistic. So going back probably 3 years now, we were watching a documentary, Autism and Us, with Paddy and Christine McGuinness.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, Christine McGuinness is diagnosed as autistic, and they talk about an AQ test. And my wife did this kind of double take, and she said, "I think you need to do this test." So we just downloaded one on our phones, and we did it there and then. And she got 7 out of 50, and I got 46. So we then went to see the GP, and I was put on a waiting list. We waited best part of 2 years, and then referred for assessment, which took about 6-7 weeks. Completing the loop, one of the assessment participants was Jill, who'd helped me all those years ago. And on 25th of July 23, over a year now, I was diagnosed as autistic.
Wow.
Now, what that has done is it's created a lot of missed pieces in the jigsaw. Why I had created this image of what it was going to be, the frustration of it's not exactly right.
Yeah.
My ability to live 2 versions of my life, and how I actually need to just live one, and that's be me. Because one of my traits is I mask a lot. I'm masking now.
Yeah.
I'm Tony in a podcast, not normal Tony.
Yeah.
I'm not great in social settings. Yeah, I get quite anxious about that. I'll pretend, but I have to say the last year has been the happiest year I've ever had, because I can actually be me and I understand me a lot more.
So I think that answers a lot of questions, doesn't it? I think the thing that you have to discover now is where you fit on that spectrum, if you like, and what your needs are, what makes you tick, what you struggle with, and I suppose you'll be finding that out for some time, won't you?
Yeah.
What I'd love to do is I'd love to bring you back to talk a little bit more about autism, because I know it's an area that you have got obviously you've got such a vested interest in now from a personal point of view, but also talking about, schools and the system and, kind of, how it affects our children and maybe, talk a little bit more about that in the future.
Well, I now spend time going into schools. I'm doing one in the morning, actually, where predominantly looking at year 10 and 11 kids who are a bit terrified of the thought of leaving school.
Yeah.
And what does the world look like in a mainstream world when I've been in special education. And I'm also involved in neurodiverse sport, which is a new organisation.
Brilliant.
That Karen McGurty, who is diagnosed as autistic, and she was an Olympic rower. And she's invited me to get involved in that and working across a number of sports in supporting what I think is quite a large autistic population in sport that's probably not diagnosed.
Yeah, no, I think even I was chatting to somebody last week in one of our schools. It's been a 35% increase in people diagnosed with autism, in the last 4 or 5 years. Which is
lots of people think, how's it spreading? Well, it's not contagious. No. We just understand it more. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Because I'd been diagnosed and given medication and given therapy because people thought I had poor mental health.
Yeah.
When in reality, if my autism was understood, lots of that could have been avoided. Yeah. So I think the better we get at understanding autism and autistic people's needs, the more we can chip away at the demands placed on society by mental health support requirements.
Absolutely.
By just understanding people. Somebody said, how do you think you can support people with autism? And this was in a sporting context better. And I said, well, just listen to them and understand what works best for them.
Yeah.
But that's not unique to autistic people. Do that with everybody.
It's about reasonable adjustments, isn't it? And understanding that not everybody fits into that category, that pigeonhole. I'd love to talk. Honestly, I would love to talk to you for another 2 hours. But I know Roy, our host, and we've all got homes to go to, haven't we? But I just wanted to thank you for today's podcast. Thank you for your honesty. I'd love to bring you back.
Yeah, I'll do that.
You're
no
fascinating.
No
you like your life experience and what you've gone through and what you continue to strive to be, I think is really inspirational. So thank you so much for coming on. I just wondered if you could just leave our guests with just a little bit of advice, one bit of advice that you would give to them for anybody that finds themselves in a situation that you found yourself in, just as a closing kind of gambit, if you like.
I think you've got to be really clear on who you are and what you value, what you love. Spend as much time as you can doing the things that you love. And it doesn't matter if people don't think that they're interesting. Do what you love. And if you keep doing that, and bear in mind, we don't know what tomorrow brings. So just hang around to find out.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Tony. And thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody for listening to the Great and New podcast. We really appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe and share, and the podcast will be available on Spotify, YouTube and all other social media platforms. Thank you so much. See you next time.